They put a really good fight up against HLE. They took a game off HLE. I think that's crazy. Like you picked Nunu and Willem, the champion nobody's playing in competitive, and you beat the number one Korean seed. Like it, teams can get advantages versus these top Eastern teams.
Hello and welcome back to The Dive, driven by Kia, Season 8, Episode 33. It is currently 12:35 a.m., the night of / technically next day morning, right after we just casted the Team Liquid versus FlyQuest final Swiss stage match. And spoiler alert, FlyQuest won again.
Yeah, it's been a very long day. 9-game day, plus interviews after, plus the draw show. And then, we're here for the dive. It might be a little bit of a quicker one than normal because we are very tired. We were supposed to actually have some guests on. I know people want the kind of dive for you vibe. We had Dracos last week. We are supposed to have guests, but everyone else went to bed. So no guests on this week, but we will try to do some of that next week. But I mean, we can kind of just jump right into it. Obviously, today, G2 got eliminated, but had a pretty exciting series against BLG. That was kind of the last hope for Europe, and I know definitely very disappointing for Europe because now that's back-to-back years. They don't get out of groups. They've actually never made it out of groups in this new format, which obviously does suck for them. And G2 put up a really good fight against BLG, so it was actually like quite an exciting series, and kind of similar to I felt like FlyQuest series against HLE, where there was like you're both going up against these really tough teams. You're kind of like doing some innovative stuff to keep it close, which was really cool. But I felt like in that one, it really just came down to that one Baron throw in like what was the final game, which was like I think probably pretty heartbreaking for G2 and pretty heartbreaking for Yike because I felt like G2 actually kind of had that last game. All they had to do was just like slow play the Baron. And they just turned way too early. Like Broken Blade was coming back from base, and all they had to do was basically wait for Broken Blade to like actually get behind them because the other team's Ezreal was dead, and like they instead like just turns off Baron and engages in like a 4v4, and they just basically lose the 4v4 in a situation where I thought they kind of had BLG checkmated. So definitely a pretty tough loss I feel like for G2 and their fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like you could kind of see it when they paused near the end because they thought there was a bug, but there wasn't a bug. So it was like, I'm sure they just, really didn't want to go out like that. It was close though. They put up a good fight for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? And I know that obviously a lot of European fans I see on Twitter and stuff are pretty unhappy about the draws. But I know from G2's perspective, from everything I've heard and from the interviews that they're giving, it's like their goal was to win Worlds, right? And if your goal is to win the whole tournament, you have to play really tough teams, right? Could they have gotten a little bit further if they played easy teams? Yeah, I'm sure they could have. But at the end of the day, it's like their stated goal is we want to win Worlds. And it's always going to be incredibly hard to do that, right? And I think, it's tough because I kind of wonder like what's next for G2 now because I felt like some of their interviews felt kind of ominous before Swiss stage where they're talking about like the if not now when, and we've been together for 2 years and like this it has to happen this tournament and like these kind of things. So I am really curious as to what's going to happen, like if the roster is going to stay the same or if they're going to make changes or like if someone's going to retire or something. I don't know, I just kind of had this feeling like when I was hearing some of the interviews that it felt a little bit ominous.
Yeah, I definitely felt that as well. I don't think, like, I feel like Caps and Broken Blade are the probably two most secure ones, right? Broken Blade,
as far as play, yeah.
As far as and sticking on the team and building around, as long as they want to still stay there, if there are going to be any types of changes. I thought Broken Blade had a great tournament overall. There were so many really big moments from him. As far as the, you're listing off things I know fans are also going to be very frustrated, or already were very frustrated with the Nocturne Oriana repeat lock-ins from them, because it was 4 games in a row of Oriana Nocturne. If you count the Weibo victory that they got first, which was a really big Broken Blade Galio counter pick on the top lane. But then, they lost both games to T1 with the Oriana Nocturne, and then people saw it in the first game versus PLG, and they were like, ah! And so I think a lot of people got really excited as the BLG series went on when they switched it and went back to what you feel like is more quintessential G2 style of like the Silas and Yasuo topside. And so you've got these, like playmaking solo laners for Caps and Broken Blade. And that's where everyone started to get really excited. And then in the last game, they set it up with the Rise split pushing, kind of surprise factor at the end there as well with the counter pick. And it was it felt like a long one with, like you're saying, the tipping point there getting so close at the end of the game, because if they hadn't lost at the Baron, where they kind of turn off and yikes, I think that the Xin Zhao turns first and gets blown up really quickly. If that had been a little bit slower, maybe, then people are thinking, what could have been. But that's what Worlds comes down to. It's the high pressure situations versus the best teams in the world, like you're saying. And it was definitely a very exciting series. I think that their fans could definitely still be proud of the team. I know that it hasn't been the happiest of times recently, in summer and stuff for LEC fans as well. But I would say chin up. They did show some of the things that people love most about G2. I feel like at this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Rise, and I thought we got to see a ton of cool picks today, especially in the 2-2 matches, because I don't know how many first time picks got shown today, but backs up against the wall, it's do or die pretty much, and people were whipping out some completely crazy stuff. Like G2 did their Rise Taric. When I saw that, I was like, yo, maybe their coach has been playing a lot of TFT or something, because that's actually a TFT comp right there. We saw Kate. Yeah, we saw Kate Lux from Weibo, which it's not a first time combo, but we haven't really seen it recently, right?
Senna Lulu as well.
Yeah, we saw the Lulu from FlyQuest. We saw
Tom Kench was the first. Senna was the first.
Yeah, that Tom Kench was really something. Oh my god,
it was really something at the beginning.
I mean,
they were smurfing in the 2v2.
I think the way he played the champ up until his item purchases was fine, but oh my god, that was really something crazy to watch. I've never seen something like this. This was early season 2 or 3 support vibes, where you just stop getting items past a certain point. You're just only consumables. I think Core might have gone on a bit of time machine on that one.
I mean, I get why people are flaming him, because he's spamming the elixirs of iron, but also can you honestly say you think it would have made any difference at all in that game, regardless of what he buys? I think there's no items that he can buy that affect that game at all. They just got hard outscaled. They actually just did no damage. I felt like the Jhin was just the mosquito Jhin, couldn't even hurt the skin, or rather the Skarner or the Cassante. I felt like their comp was completely hopeless late game.
That could be. Jhin hasn't looked that good this tournament. He looked really good in play-ins, and then in the Swiss stage, he's, like you were saying, just seemed like he does nothing. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think he could have built better, or it would have done anything. They probably would have lost anyway, but I don't know, Locket, Redemption, there's things you can build, I think, that, would help more than 3 elixirs
Oh,
of
I
iron.
agree. There's for sure better builds. I'm not saying that at all. Like, I think like Lock Redemption, like you say, or like Knight's Vow or whatever, are all better. But like, I also just think that game was cooked. I think the Tom Kench build has no effect on that game.
Okay.
I
Do you
mean,
think it does? You really think it changes the game?
That's all I could focus on watching that game. I just kept seeing Elixir of Iron every other recall on cooldown. It was actually like the craziest thing I've ever seen. I don't know. Like I actually couldn't focus on anything else
I
besides
mean,
that.
their mid jungle was 1 in 10 combined. Like APA actually went 0-5-0. M2 is like 1-5-1. And Impact Jax is also just not it. I feel like it's like, yeah, you can flame Core's build, but I actually felt like the bot lane was the only bright spot in that entire first game. I feel like they were like the big reason why they created a lot of leads, and I don't know. I mean, Impact Jax for me and Impact Aurora and stuff is just not it. I don't understand really why TL wasn't putting him on tanks. It's like when they played against Gam and he plays a carry, and then you put him back on Cassante and he's just like Thanos again, and then they're like, let's go back to the Jax. You know, to me that was a bit painful because even in that first game where they were up like, what was it at the biggest lead? It was like at what point maybe like 5K, 6K or something like that. It was a pretty huge advantage, right? I think he was still down like 40, 50 CS or something like that, playing heavily through side lanes. And I just feel like this is the problem with Impact on a lot of these carries that have to be greedy, is that he's just never greedy, and then he's like always ends up not strong enough. Like, you know, in that game he ended up an entire item down on Whippo on the Cassante. He can't pressure sides at all, and obviously like even just compositionally I think it was really hard for them to kill backline because that was like the Lulu game, I guess. But I don't know, I kind of hated their drafts.
I mean, the biggest thing to me is when they started getting these picks. The first one in the river where they, you know, APA flashes into the Baron pit and then has no way out, and they're able to get the pick there, and then they get the tower after, and then they walk up in mid lane, and Whippo's able to pick APA as well. There was one more pick. I can't remember what it was, but there was this chain of events where FlyQuest, you know, they're losing the whole game, and then they get this like pick after pick after pick to get money back for their, you know, for their solid team fight, and then you know, it's kind of brute force and run Team Liquid over. But up until that point, Team Liquid had been running the whole game in that Tom Kench Jin one where they like absolutely blasted bottom side.
Yeah,
and we should explain, by the way, with
except for mid lane, because they were losing mid hard the whole time.
Yeah, except for mid lane, really quad the entire time, especially because of the visits from Inspired and Bucio. They obviously had a big target on APA's back, but TL had been you know, controlling because of the, you know, success of bottom lane stuff. But we should also explain the Elixirs of Iron and the Heartsteel for Core JJ Tom Kench, because like you get the size increase for your Tom Kench, and so the, you know, his tongue comes out from the edge of the model of the toad, and so like you make it longer, you know, with the size increases. So like he's looking to make plays, right, with the champion. Like they were trying to snowball, and then yeah, he just kept on chugging them. Yeah, so
Yeah, I mean,
it's a huge drop in gold.
I get that it does something, but to me, it's just one of those super overcooked builds where it's like, you know, just because there's some small interaction in a champion's kit doesn't mean you can completely overcommit to this one tiny aspect. It's like the reason people aren't picking Tom Kench isn't because they're like, man, if my tongue went a little bit longer, this champion would be it right now. No, they're like, you know, he peels, but people aren't really playing him anyway. So I think it was just super, super overcooked. And even though there is like, you know, some advantage to what he's doing, it's absolutely not worth doing it. So yeah, I thought that was a really wild thing to see on a, you know, that kind of game where you got to win.
Yeah. At the end of the day, they're 500 gold a pop, and it's temporary, you know, so it's like you got a snowball. You like have to make the most of it, if you're buying those early. So
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I guess we kind of just jumped over to the NA stuff. The last thing I'll say about EU is that the thing that I feel like a little bit bad for G2 about, and maybe this is going to come off a bit harsh, is just that I actually just think the rest of the region is really weak right now. And it's kind of like a steel sharpens steel type of thing. And I do feel like it's very difficult if you don't really have good practice throughout the year to be able to compete against the best teams in the world, right? And I think that, Mad looked really weak. I think Fnatic overall looked really weak. So I do think it's difficult because G2, I think, is like so head and shoulders above the rest of the region. Like very clearly, they won all 4 trophies. Regardless of the fact that they did look a little bit more vulnerable at times and like lost a couple series, still they're just winning everything. And it's tough. I think if you don't have people to like push you really, really hard and be able to, be in a situation where you're constantly getting shown like holes in your game and being forced to improve and forced to adapt. And, I think that's the difficult thing for them. And that is something that I think has been good about NA this year is Cloud9 and TL and FlyQuest, I think kind of were able to like help each other improve, right? In that they're kind of pushing each other. Obviously 100 Thieves came in at the end and had that big upset, but it was like kind of the big 3 for most of the year. And I do think that's, something that was a bit advantageous for us. I think the ending for TL feels like very sad, especially game 3. Obviously, it was just like the most hopeless game of all time. It's like, 3 minutes in, and you feel like the game's basically done. Because Kled, I've played a lot of Kled. I had a while where I was just obsessed with Kled. And it's funny because I actually used to watch APA solo queue VODs playing Kled, and I used to watch a lot of Soul Mario, who's a Kled one trick. And this is just a champion where you are so insanely early game focused. I feel like that if you're not ahead or right off the bat, you were just absolutely useless. You're so screwed. And when they lost that 2v2 mid, I mean, yeah, there is a world in which the other lanes could just super hard carry, but I felt like the game was just completely over. As soon as they lost that 2v2 mid against Yone Skarner, it's like, you're playing Sejuani Kled and you lost 2v2 mid, it's just absolutely cooked. So it was really exciting seeing it get locked in, and then immediately the game just deflated so fast. And your year is ending in this game, and I'm sure TL knew it, where it's like you're playing this game out for like 30 minutes or whatever, where it's basically already over at 4 minutes, and it's just such a sad ending to the year for them, because I do genuinely think they, like the form that they were in, throughout most of the summer split is the best I've seen an NA team play in so many years. And for whatever reason, they weren't really able to make it click, in those kind of big hurdles like at summer finals and at Worlds. But I don't think it takes away from the fact that they were that good for a lot of the year. But it is really sad, right? When it's like you worked that hard all year, and then at the end of the day, you lost summer finals, you went out in Swiss, and I think it's tough to be able to kind of like feel that it was worth it sometimes as a pro who's putting in all those hours. So I'm not sure what their takeaway is going to be or how they're going to feel, but I do hope that the team continues together, because I feel like their growth from last year's Worlds to this year is still insane.
Yeah, and I think something we talked about kind of recurring throughout the whole year with Team Liquid is related to the meta. And Liquid, I think, absolutely was the best team in North America at playing the meta that was like, in place for almost the whole year, which was AD carries mid, like Corki Tristana, and, eventually Smolder Lucian type stuff. And then just a bunch of front lines with him, right? Like the APA Yon duo carry thing. And so I do think they had a little bit of trouble adapting to this World's meta, because finally we're getting some variety in mid lane where mages are being played in their like I think it was game 1. We had Syndra versus Ori. And that matchup actually reminds me of last Worlds, where APA played that against Palafox when Energy and TL met each other, and it looked kind of like that, like APA kind of got rolled. So it's definitely not a matchup that he's probably super comfortable in, or playing that style of mage, but even more so than just individual play, I think that as a team you have to play a lot differently when you don't have so much safety in your kit or whatnot, because with Tristana or Corki, they don't really need a ton of vision to play. It's not even really worth ganking them most of the time, but as you saw in the Sidra game, he was just getting ganked repeatedly. And so, especially when you watch a lot of LCK games get played, it's just like 100 ganks mid nonstop. So I think that's, probably something that they could keep working on. And just, I think TL not really being comfortable on Aurora and Yone, who ended up being kind of like the hot picks in Swiss stage so far, really put them at a disadvantage. So you had to either play against it or use all your bans on them or whatnot. When you can't take advantage of the strongest champion, you're just at such a huge draft gap. So I think they did play well, but obviously, still some stuff to work on.
On your hopes that they, continue to work together, Isaac, and stick together. I know Spawn, talked about asking Steve at the beginning of this year when he took the head coaching job. He said, if you give me 3 years, which is a very long time in esports, then he would be able to get Steve. I don't remember exactly what he said he would be able to get him, but he asked for 3 years to be able to
World
get him
championship.
Yeah, I was like, I hope
He asked for 3
We'll
years.
see.
That's about all I got for you.
but that's the kind of timeline that they're looking at, and Steve really is aligned with Spawn, and is really committed to Spawn, and Spawn is really committed to this group of players. So I think that bodes very well for your hopes of them like continuing to build on everything that they improved on this year and stick together, because it really was a very quick year for them, a quick ascent up to the top. They just were like fourth, fifth place in spring, and then spring playoffs, they flipped the switch, and bot lane starts dominating, and Umpty's controlling enemy jungle so well, and TL just like start this big hype train rolling that, yeah, it did have a bit of a bitter ending here at Worlds, at the hands of FlyQuest again. But as they said, FlyQuest has been working this whole year also with the sharpening Team Liquid and sharpening Cloud9, and all really making each other better. And so I think that they will stick together. I don't know about 3 years, but I'm thinking next year they will continue to build on everything that they improved on this year. I agree with Medios as well, though, on the flexibility thing, because I think that's something else that they dropped, where their philosophy was actually to have pretty concentrated champion pools for people. And so whenever you get to an international tournament, there are going to be, possibilities of really big shifts and stuff like that. And so it's always such a hard push and pull, where you want to have a concentrated champion pool because you want to be experts on stuff, but then it can't be too concentrated that you're not flexible enough to deal with changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's something that happens a lot. And I've always said, because there's multiple ways you can look at when a new champion gets introduced to the meta. There's some players that are so desperate to get on the newest thing, right? Like we see that with, first NA player that comes to mind would be like Insanity, right? It's like he had a lot of success playing, being the first guy to play the new champion, and it seems like he picks him up pretty quick. So there's that type of player, but then you also have the opposite side, which is the player who just likes to play the stuff that they're really comfortable on, and they can play against the new stuff well, right? It's like, I don't need to necessarily play Yone, but I have these picks that I know are good into him, and it's not going to be a problem if they get him. So there's definitely multiple ways to go about it. I don't think there's, you probably don't want to be all the way one way or the other, but as long as you have some answer to it, and it's not just like, oh, there goes one of our bans, and because then pretty soon it's like, oh, there goes two of our bans, so there's the third one. and you
Yeah.
have just no flexibility in draft if something else becomes a problem. So
I mean, they had an answer. It just didn't work at all, right? Like their answer was Kled. And I talked to APA after their games, and I mean, like I said, it didn't work at all, right? But like I talked to APA
Yeah.
after the games, and he said that they actually played it a lot in scrims and versus like really good teams, and it was working really, really well. He said he was 1v1ing like a lot of the best mid laners. It was working really, really well every single game, and he just felt like they just like failed to execute. You know, in his mind, he was saying that in the 2v2, he felt like if he flashed a different angle to dodge quads like knockup, that he could have been close enough to help finish him off and then get like the remount and be able to get like a double kill, and he thinks the game looks completely different. Whether or not it is that way, you know, you don't have to think the answer is good, but like they did have an answer, it just failed, right?
Yep.
Like it completely failed. And so I think that's tough, and I think people are going to flame him for playing Kled, but I also think it's one of those things where it's like I want people to play high risk, high reward champions. Like I think it's exciting, and I think if you believe that it's a 70-30 or a 60-40 or whatever, like if you believe that it's in your favor to pick, then hell, you should go for it. You should have the confidence to do it. So I do respect that they were willing to bring that out, especially when he basically never plays melee champions at the LCS level. I think it was literally the second game of melee champions he has played since he's come to the LCS. He played them in Academy, and he's played them a lot in solo queue and stuff, but like that's not their thing that they have played. So I thought that part was cool, and I always do find it a little bit weird when people are like, I love when people break the meta and bring out new picks. It's so great, and like, oh, G2's so cool because they play Yasuo, and then someone picks something and does bad with it, and they're like, this guy's trash. Like, why would you pick Kled? That's so stupid. You know what I mean? Because I do think obviously some of them are going to fall flat, and this one, I mean, that game was an absolute disaster, right? Like it was an absolute disaster. It was over in a couple minutes, but yeah, it's just too bad that their answer didn't really work out. I will say though,
it was kind of funny. Oh, I was just gonna say it was kind of funny because me and Seeker were watching the games today, and something that I think is fun to talk about is like, you know, what do you think is the worst champion in the game right now, or like, you know, bottom few champions? And everyone we talked about got picked at some point. Like I was saying, we were talking about like Morgana, who was one of the worst champs, and then like right after we said that, boom, Morgana jungle. We were saying Taric. Yeah. I mean, you know, every champion in League, like people give the designers and balance team a lot of like flack, but the game's pretty well balanced for how many characters there are. And so even if it's the worst thing, doesn't mean it's never viable.
Yeah.
But I've, you know, I feel like Taric's one of the weakest champs. We saw that as well. And then Kled, I think, might actually be my vote for worst champion in the game. Like, no other champion has this like built-in loss condition. It's like, I'm chunked to half health. I got a recall. I cannot play the game anymore. So,
but if you
I'm not a huge fan of the champion, but
you just fight and you remount, and then you're back to full, baby.
Yep, that happens. You don't just run up and die. But I mean, you know, that's cool. I mean, that's just my opinion, right? Like, obviously he believed in it, and from what you heard, it was working in scrims and stuff. So it's definitely like a feast or famine champion. So maybe if the early play went the other way, it would have looked totally different.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea. It might have failed either way, but like it wasn't. My point is more just like this was their answer. It wasn't just like a random thoughtless thing that they threw out. It just also failed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and we kind of talked about it. It was about winning the 2v2 and then being able to use Glide Ultimate and control silence and stuff. And so FlyQuest just stopped them at the beginning. I think that's why it really felt so painful that last game, because you knew from the really early on that FlyQuest had such a large advantage, and it was going to be so hard for Team Liquid to do anything about it, that the last game, especially when that is the end of your year, for the last game to just feel like they're ahead and they're just beating you up for a long time, and there wasn't a lot that they could do about it, I think really led to that feeling. And so I hope that they can, you know, still keep their heads held high and you know, look at the year as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I have to say is that like FlyQuest well and truly deserved the title of best team in the LCS, right? Obviously they won the summer split, they were the summer champions, but I feel like after that, a lot of people, myself included, because over the course of the year I felt like TL did look stronger for more time. I thought that TL was going to do better, right? And FlyQuest came to Worlds. They outperformed them. They beat them head to head. But also, I'm really fried. But like it was HLE FlyQuest was after our last episode, right? We haven't talked about that on the dive, right? Pretty sure. I think it must have been. But like that series was really really cool, and they brought out all these different interesting picks. We had obviously like Quad coming out with Casio, which became kind of big for them. We had
they let through the Yone
from Whippo. We had Hui stuff. We had obviously the Nunu Olaf game. Like they did some really cool stuff in draft and played really really well with it, and were able to pull back games with like compositional advantages and draft advantages and stuff and play towards their win conditions like so well. So that really, really impressed me. I mean, HLE is #1 LCK seed. Whether or not you think Gen.G or them are better, it's kind of like irrelevant. It's one of the best teams in the world. It's definitely one of the favorites to win the entire event. And, like FlyQuest was arguably one fight away potentially from being able to win that first game. Obviously, it ended with football getting caught and the game kind of falls apart. They don't get that final fight, but then they do win the second game. Third game's kind of a blowout. But like that was a really exciting series for me, and the fact that they were able to follow that up by then beating TL again, just like super solidifies. It's like this is the best team. There's no doubt about it. This is the best team from LCS, and I think it's like really exciting for them that they have kind of been able to develop that much and improve that much, and kind of beyond a shadow of a doubt prove it.
Yeah, I mean, I think FlyQuest, obviously, I totally agree with everything you said about them. What I would add is I feel like, to me, this makes such a strong case for Inspired just being like the hands-down best jungler in North America right now. Because for a while, I've been kind of like blabber-pilled. And obviously, blabber's really good too. But I think with Inspired, what really impresses me is that we've seen him on multiple different teams with rookies on a lot of them, back with EG and now with FlyQuest, where he comes into a pretty clear leadership role where he has an idea of how he wants to play the game, and he's able to get everyone on board with it and also win, which I think is super hard to do when you have that extra pressure of all the responsibility of the win or lose is kind of falls on you. For most players, that will subtract from their personal play, but I think Inspired has just done such a good job of being really flexible in how he plays. He's had the CEO of Full Clear thing earlier in the year, but then he also can just switch to the Ivern or the support Nunu. His Skarner also looked good. So yeah, he's just really, really impressed me, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, he definitely does, especially because he has so much knowledge about like every other lane and how the game works as a whole. Talking to the coaching staff on that team as well as the other players, like Inspired has input on basically every aspect of how that team works. So 100% agree with you there, especially because he also does so much with rookie players. With the Danny team, like. That was one of my favorite teams of all time, that EG team. And then Masu has just flourished, on this team as well, incorporating Quad, who already had, a lot of history, but came in on a rough spot where he's, trying to replace Jensen's shoes, which a lot of fans were, kind of against because of the previous Inspired and Whippo trash talk. Or self-team talk that drew a lot of drama. But honestly, very excited to see where this team goes. One thing I did want to bring up with you guys with the draft with this team is because they had not used Yone at Worlds, even though Quad did play it in LCS finals, do you think they were trying to, especially because they gave it over to Hanwha and like tried to do that Casio Amumu, counter comp? Do you think that they were trying to like bait further teams in the tournament into thinking like they also do not play Yone, but then they're like, oh, it's elimination versus steal. All right, fine, we have to take it. We'll slam it now. Do you think there was that level of mind games, or is that too much cooking again? Because like they had given it over to other teams, like very good teams, and had not jumped on the pick. And I thought Quad looked quite good on it. So
I would guess no. It's hard to say for sure, but I don't know. I feel like when you're on stage and you're playing against these really good teams and these really important matches, usually like, you know, hey, let's not play our best strategy isn't really something in the front of my mind, especially when, you know, it's like, hey, if we lose this, we're out. Damn, like we hid the fact that we play Yone, but we're also not in the tournament anymore. So like, I don't know if that was worth it, guys.
Well, it'll be really hidden then, because
so it hadn't been up in an elimination one until now, and then they picked it. So like the fact that maybe they thought they could get away with it, you know.
I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. I don't think so.
I just like to throw out the conspiracy theories. Because stuff like that, like if you can get through without showing things in tournaments like this, like that, it's such a huge boon. We saw how big of an effect some of the surprise picks had, like the Nunu, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely possible. My feeling is probably he's just less comfortable on it, and so they didn't want to go towards it. I know he did play it once in playoffs, and it looked good, and I think he played well in this game today as well. But also, Quad is not known as a melee guy, right? Like most of his career was on control mages, and then obviously he played a lot of AD carries this year because that's heavily what the meta was. But it's like his most played 3 champions before he spammed a million games of Corki this year were Ori, Syndra, then Cassio, and then after that it's Azir, Victor, Zoe, and it's like now there's Tristana and Corki in there, but after that it was Seraphine, right? It's like it was all mages. It's all that sort of
Yone
style.
looked good to me. All I'm saying.
I'm not saying he didn't play it, but I just think that's probably. I think they probably didn't go towards it because it probably wasn't his comfort, right? It's just my assumption. But I obviously do think he can play it well. I think Quad has just been super impressive throughout summer. I feel like he got so much better from his debut games in the beginning of summer towards the end of Split, and obviously they had like a lot of faith in him and talked a lot about being able to give him more resources and how he needs to ask for those resources and stuff to be able to set himself up for success. So I feel like Quad's been a really cool story. And honestly, Masu has played really well, I think, overall at Worlds. He has really impressed me. And Jan and Core were smurfing, I think, overall at Worlds too for TL. I think both the AD carries were really, really good. And Jan, especially when you compare him to last year's Worlds, where I think he was not good. Like, he had a really, really rough tournament and didn't have much of an impact. He was the reason they were winning a lot of the games that they were winning, and in good positions in a lot of cases. And even when the team was losing, I felt like Jan was often a standout in those losses. So I think it's definitely been cool to see some of these players developing and the team kind of putting that trust in them. We are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to preview the quarterfinals matches.
Hello?
Bro, why are you parking?
Seriously? What is that?
Remote smart parking assist. You could have parked anywhere.
They could have parked there. They could have parked there. They could have parked there.
Welcome back to The Dive, driven by Kia. It is now time to talk about the quarterfinals. We have our top 8 teams. All 4 LPL teams made it. 3 out of the 4 LCK teams made it. And LCS made it again.
We're in there. We squeaked in.
We did indeed. So the matchups, I don't know. I don't even know if we know the order that they're going to be played in. I guess we probably don't. But we could start with Gen.G because that is what we drew. Definitely was my doomsday match. That is absolutely the team I wanted to play least. I feel like they are the team that has looked the best in the tournament and looks kind of the least exploitable. So it is definitely very sad, especially after getting the NA versus NA match where I was really hoping we would get to play against like DK and Weibo and G2 and try to show our stuff there. So this one is going to be tough because, it's if FlyQuest can't at least be competitive and take some games and everything, people are just gonna act as though they did nothing to deserve to actually be there. So that's kind of, I think, the rough side of it. Obviously, the glass half full is that, hey, if you do win or you win some games and you look really, you look competitive, then people all of a sudden I think are going to give them a ton of credit. And we did see them compete against HLE, so you kind of have to hope that they can continue to surprise them a little bit and be able to find some windows to be able to kind of make some stuff happen. That does get harder, obviously, now that they've shown some of those picks, though.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be as doomsday as the first take there with Gen.G, because that's also how we felt about Hanwha. Those two teams rated very, very closely coming into this tournament, and FlyQuest, I really like the approach that they took and just fully embracing. We're gonna full send on a different strategy. We're going to try and counter them rather than copy them. I'm always in favor of trying to, play to your strengths and try and cook up some counters. Even Nukduck gave this controversial interview before that series that he got flamed a lot for by fans and stuff, where he was like, "Hey, we're not going to scrim any of the top LPL or LCK teams, and we're going to hide strats." And I was like, "Oh, like that's a cool Hail Mary, because you're going against Hanwha, it's LCK number 1, and they're like, all right, we're going to try and, cook up some really crazy stuff." But people are like, "What are you doing? You're not going to get the best practice." And then after their result with Hanwha, where they pushed them in game number 1 and were in spots, that were winnable. And then game number 2, they actually won with the Nunu, and people saw on screen Hanwha not playing around Nunu. The obvious one is the snare on the teleport, but also, but also a lot of the objectives and big smite combos and stuff. So I feel like I don't know. I'm filled with hope, because if we go into a match that is like TL versus Pain or TL versus Gam, then it's a little bit more dread, because you're like, well, if we win, everyone's just going to say you should have won. And if you lose, then you get mocked to all hell. So it's kind of there's not a lot of win there, But if you go up against a team that you are not supposed to even come close to, are not supposed to touch, and you even do what they did versus Hanwha, then it's like a big W, and it's very exciting. And, especially as NA perspective, I feel like we are always underdog perspective and looking for these miracle on ice type upsets, and that's what I love most about being a North American participant and fan, and caster is our biggest upsets I feel like are always our most exciting, greatest moments. And so I am excited, a little bit of extra excitement because of the series versus Hanwha. Of course.
Would you have been more excited if we got LNG, though?
Yes. You're right.
Me too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I usually look at NA as kind of the underdog in these things. I mean, especially versus Gen.G, but I don't know. I mean, call me crazy, but I do have some hope for FlyQuest. Am I putting my life savings on them? Probably not. But, they put a really good fight up against HLE. They took a game off HLE. I think that's crazy. You picked Nunu in Willem, the champion nobody's playing in competitive, and you beat the number 1 Korean seed. Teams can get advantages versus these top Eastern teams, but actually closing out a game and winning is so incredibly impressive. So I don't know, maybe this is just the yearly gotta get your hopes up before you crush them for me, but I like what I've seen from FlyQuest. I felt proud as an NA fan to watch them versus HLE, and I'm just hoping to feel that same way against Gen.G, even if they don't win, which realistically they probably won't. If they put up a fight, if they make Gen.G have to sweat and work for it, I think that's as much as I can ask. As long as we're not just the classic go in desperate from minute 1, just everyone overforcing and spontaneously combusting on stage, I think we'll be chilling.
I don't think they're going to do that. I feel like they're going to play, or at least try to play, the similar style as they did against HLE, where they were really patient against HLE, right? Like, even when they were falling behind early and things weren't really working out, they seemed very patient and pretty, like, calm, cool, and collected. So I don't expect them to just be, like, chickens with their heads cut off or anything like that. Honestly, if they get a win against Gen.G, like, if they take a game against Gen.G, I'm going to be really happy. I'll be really, really excited. They did beat HLE in one game, and game one was super winnable. Like, once they actually evened out the gold, game one was super winnable. It was unfortunate it ended in that way for FlyQuest, where Whipple got caught, and then everyone kind of tries to pile in and save them, and they all die, and then the game just ends. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited, and maybe it is just like copium, but I just felt like because they played so well against HLE, I was like, if we get a bit easier team, maybe they could just win. You know what I mean? Like, I was kind of feeling that way. So that's why I guess I feel a bit more down in the dumps about them getting Gen.G, because I'm just like, Gen.G's actually just too good. Like, Gen.G's actually so good. They're so solid. So that is kind of my fear, I guess, against them, is that maybe you play a really, really good series and that's enough to beat a lesser team and you still get 3-0'd by Gen.G because that team is just kind of insane.
I'd like to play a game for this series, and I would like each of us to choose a champion that has not been played yet and bet on FlyQuest using that as their next surprise card. I will go first. I choose Fiddlesticks for Inspired because he has a history with the champion, and it's actually pretty good right now. Can you guys help cook? I feel like our comments for the video should also be filled with FlyQuest's next possible cook for their champion.
I mean, it hasn't been played at Worlds, Garen.
I like that one.
I could see him playing Garen against Cassante or something, right? Like, yeah. I think that's actually a pretty reasonable pick, and he did it in the LCS finals.
I also think it is acceptable to submit a champion that has been played, but in a different role. Like, Whipple has been spamming Xin Zhao top in Champions Queue. I haven't liked the look of that one or the sound of that one, but that type of thing, you're allowed to submit that.
You can submit it. It's garbage, but no.
Yeah. Even though it's been used as jungle, if you submit it as top lane, acceptable answer.
Acceptable. Okay.
That is kind of tough. I feel like since I play jungle, I'd have to pick a jungle champ. Maybe Elise. I feel like there was a situation today where I felt like Elise could have been picked. I don't think she's great, but if you're trying to play against a better opponent, you want to catch him off guard. I think she could potentially work.
Mm-hmm. Well, some dives, maybe some early action. Are the patch? Because I know I saw there was a patch where they made a change to Elise. I'm pretty sure it is not. It is after. Yeah, it's after
the Worlds patch.
Yeah, because they did make the change where you can actually E-flash now, which is super sick. But yeah, I think it's after the 14-18.
Yeah, it is 14-19. Yeah. Yeah, she also got some other buffs. I know you can you can rappel down without there being an enemy in range and stuff. So you can you don't have to let people catch up to you. You can rappel and dodge the lane and then go back down. I think they reduced some cooldowns and stuff as well. So she got some pretty good buffs. But yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what FlyQuest does. I mean, I think Ivern's gonna get permanent. I think that every team against FlyQuest should really probably ban Ivern, Renekton +1, because I do think Whippo is very good on Renekton, and Ivern I think enables them to play in a way that I think is very difficult to deal with, because I do think they're pretty good at kind of minimizing loss and just scaling up and playing 5v5, and I feel like Ivern is the best jungler for that if you can kind of get away with it. I'm not sure what the next ban should be, and I mean, maybe if FlyQuest can cook enough picks that if you're talking about a way in, it's okay, maybe you can free up some of these champions that you're really, really good at by making them worry about other things, right? It's okay, if they can play a game of Nunu and win on Nunu and it has to get banned or something, then I don't know, maybe you can open up some other picks that are really good for you.
I think that'd be really funny to see Gen.G, Chovy and Canyon saying, we got to ban Nunu. I cannot play against Nunu. That would be awesome.
The pressure is insane.
Yeah. Them snowballs.
Mm-hmm. The funniest thing about the Nunu game was I don't even feel like the early game went well for him at all. Like, and I've always seen Nunu, at least when I watch people who play it, it's just kind of like a relentless ganker, and they farm fast, but then they're just kind of rolling snowballs through the lanes over and over and over and being so obnoxious. But I didn't even really feel like he got that much done early. He just got a lot done late, like it felt like, and because even in that series, it felt like Peanut was getting so much done in the early levels, and Peanut has just been like insane, I think, with his pathing and his early game advantages that he's been able to get. Even against when they played Gen.G, I thought he played really well, but. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I do think it's very Gen.G favored as one of the big teams. Obviously, they came back and did like kind of undo what happened at finals. They beat HLE in that matchup to go 3-0, and I do think they're looking pretty rock solid. Even though I know a lot of people have been more critical, I feel like, of Canyon and feeling like this meta doesn't really fit him. I still think that Gen.G is like pretty close to bulletproof.
I think that inspired. So the early game on Nunu, I remember he focused on the Yasuo lane in mid lane, and I think that's one thing he did accomplish pretty well, because Nunu is really good into enemy like melee carries, both because you can gank their lanes super easy with a snowball, but then also ultimate for later. So maybe if we do see the trend of more melee solo laners, we'll see the return of Nunu. I feel he definitely left it on the board and talked about how they've legitimately practiced it a decent amount, and so it's not just a one-off thing. So yeah, if like you're saying, if they create this like special list of extra fearful things, then start to squeeze out some power picks.
All right, do you guys want to talk about next series?
Yes, sir.
All right, we have Top versus T1 is the next one, which I think this should be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me at Worlds, I'm always rooting for North America and then Faker. So Faker's in this one. So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Going to see if they can work their magic, because T1 hasn't been looking too hot, but in their last few series, they have been looking a little bit better, more hope. They 2-0 G2, they, advanced. So yeah, it's going to be pretty competitive. I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, they did play already once. Go ahead.
I was just gonna agree. I'm kind of in the same boat of the NA, and then as soon as we are out or are not playing T1, then you kind of go jump on the Faker ship, which is a very reliable ship to be on. And the cool thing about this so far, this tournament for me, is as much as Faker is the GOAT, Zeus is my favorite player on the team, and Zeus has been exceptional. His Gragas was masterful, pulling that one out, countering the Jax, and countering their entire team comp, and just play after play after play. I always love how aggressive Zeus plays, plays his lanes. And I really can't help but root for him and root for this team. It is the most legendary organization, but I just also love that they're now like really, again, I guess it's kind of similar to last year where they don't come into the tournament at their peak. They've had their troubles, they've had to overcome various struggles. So in the books, in the lore, you always root for the heroes that have had to like overcome whatever struggles. And this year, again, summer really rough for them. And so even though it's the most successful organization of all time, with the most famous and most successful player of all time, they somehow still craft themselves into being these big underdogs, and they're like, we
The
barely
defending
got
world
in there.
champions are such
Yeah.
underdogs. It's an
Yeah.
incredible rags
It's
to
so
riches
true, though.
story.
It's so true.
But they keep doing it. They keep like taking control of the story. It's like the script writers like, right, they know what they're doing here, and they're like, here's our hero again. Put him back at the bottom. Now climb back up to the top. And like, how can you not, want to jump on board with that?
That's really funny when you put it that way. The defending world champions, most successful team ever, and they're underdogs.
And they're coming in. They squeak by. They barely got in. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, because I mean, when you watch them play, they've not been looking like the best team ever in their recent games. They've definitely been a little bit shaky for sure. But yeah, I'm looking at their game versus Top earlier, and I'm curious how it's going to change now that, there's been a lot more games at Worlds, and I think people are starting to settle on, like which champions are the most OP. And I think one you're probably happy with, Kobe, is the Skarner is looking really crazy at Worlds so far. He is just... Did he win like every game today? I don't know. It felt like it. We've been seeing a lot of attempts at beating Skarner. Like, I don't know about the Zhenjiao. That seems sus at best to me. But
21 games played, 71% win rate at Worlds.
yeah, I mean, and so Top had that. They had Skarner and Aurora against T1 last time they met as their mid jungle against like Wukong, Nico. So I think that did seem like an uphill battle for T1 off draft. So, but there's a lot more data since then. I think that like the first game of the tournament for both these teams isn't necessarily going to say a whole lot about how the next one goes. So yeah, we're just going to have to see how each team adapts to the meta and what their plan is. Like, are they going to trade the OP characters? Are they going to ban certain ones? Are they going to counter them? There's so much that could happen.
I mean, it is always really funny, right? Because T1 at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, they did have a rough summer, but I think they're actually having a really good Worlds overall. And it's one of those things where it's like you come into Worlds and you kind of just can't help but believe that they're going to do well because they do every friggin' single time, but there's not really any good analytical reason that you have for it if they come in not looking that good in summer. But then Faker has never lost more than one game in groups, never. Ever, like, he's never lost more than one game in groups, and he's never missed World Semis. And so it's like, it just always happens. Like,
that's
just
plot armor.
It's insane, right? Like, they barely ever lose at Worlds. And so, I mean, it is just incredibly impressive, the amount of consistency that he has had, and obviously that the org has had for so many years. And I do feel like they really did show up. Yeah, they lost to Top to start things off, but like, they didn't have the easiest path, right? Like, they beat BLG, the number one LPL seed. Yeah, they got to play like Pain, I guess, then. But like, they beat BLG, they 2-0 G2. There was like one game was close. The other game, I think game number 1 was like pretty one-sided, and game 2 was the close one. But overall, I feel like they're looking quite good. I think Zeus is really on form. I feel like with more melee champions and stuff coming in, I feel like Baker can play a lot of those style of champions. Like Silas being back in the mix, I think is definitely good for him potentially. And honestly, when we see supports cooking up different picks, whether or not they're going to be the best, I feel like if there is that flexibility, Carry is so good when the meta gets kind of more wide open and you can play different stuff. So if it does move beyond just the like 4 engaged champs, if it's more than just like Rel, Leona, Alistar, Nautilus, whatever, then Carry, I think, is even more enabled. So I feel like the crazier the meta gets, the more that they can kind of benefit. And Guma, I feel like, has just been kind of a rock for this team pretty much the entire year, even when they were really struggling. He has looked really, really good. And then Owner, I feel like, has been popping off at Worlds. He has been pretty stellar. So I feel like T1 are in a pretty good spot, but Top is obviously a very strong team as well. And I think this is going to be a pretty tough match. Like, Top, I feel like, I mean, they had a pretty hard path too, to be honest. I mean, they played T1, then they got Gen.G. Obviously, Fnatic is maybe a bit of an easier one for like teams of this level. And then they had DK. But like overall, I feel like still pretty hard path and still looking quite good, even though people were flaming 369. I thought he looked really strong against DK, so maybe kind of like bought himself a little bit of leeway because people were roasting him, I feel like, after some of the earlier games.
Yeah, I mean the loss to Gen.G, like the Rumble game where he's getting picked off. Yeah, I feel like that the hoopu flame comments or whatever are always so extreme. Just want to get in there with maximum memes. I don't think that Cream is going to continue to get so much Aurora and Yone as far as the power picks go at this tournament. Getting his fair share of it because Fnatic gave him the Yone, and then he had the double Auroras versus DK. So I definitely agree as far as like the way that the tournament is kind of flowing is going to get a bit more restrictive, and it might have to come down to bottom lane. And you mentioned Keria. I feel like Mako is such an insane playmaker for this team, and if it like he's very good if it is these like engage supports. I feel like that's going to be right in their wheelhouse, and then it's going to be on T1. If we think even back to last year Worlds, like is T1 going to push us towards more like lane dominant and range supports again? They might be
Maybe
able
Lucio
to.
is the trendsetter, and we're gonna get Lulu and Senna.
Yep. FlyQuest. Everyone's going to take notice of all FlyQuest picks from now on after the new. So we don't know what kind of box we've opened there. Pandora's support box has possibly been opened as well. But yeah, I think I'm actually really interested in how this bottom lane matchup is going to go, because I definitely agree with you as far as Guma just being so consistent for T1. But
I feel like Jackie Love has kind of become that too, though, which is cool, because he used to always have a reputation as just like an inter, and like, oh, he's gonna do these crazy things, and like, he's 100 or 0, but like I feel like he's become way more consistent for top in summer and really just this whole year. I feel like he's not the same guy. He's not like the coin flipper that he maybe has the reputation of being.
Yeah, and he's been so critical for this team so far at the tournament. So very interested to see. Also, with Tien, everyone's always kind of looking at is it going to be like another underperformance? Because I guess he'll be looking at 2019 and pointing there, because we are back in Europe, and Tien's looking quite good so far for this tournament. So I mean, this matchup is very exciting because I feel like it is quite close. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this one's going to be a banger. It's just the FlyQuest Gen.G one, should not be that close, but I feel like this top T1 one definitely should be.
I think a lot of the quarterfinals matches are going to be really close. I mean, I'm sad that FlyQuest got Gen.G, but I mean, we have some banger quarters. Like top T1 is really, really good. We can talk about HLE BLG as well. That is LPL number 1, LCK number 1 going up against each other, right? Now that is pretty insane. Obviously, BLG did beat BG2 at the end of the day, but they kind of got pushed to the limit, and that was in a 2-2 match. They were even in the 1-2 matches before that, so they were not in the position that people were expecting them to be in. They were my crystal ball pick to win the tournament. They were also my pick to go 3-0 in Swiss. So not really working out so well for me. But BLG I just thought was so insane in the LPL. I'm pretty surprised by how they have looked. They definitely have not really shown up in the way that I thought they would. And even after they lost the best of ones, like after they lost to LNG and T1, I was like, okay, well, those teams are playing really well. It's just BO1, like who cares? But the fact that they actually almost lost to G2, I think is really maybe even more concerning, because it's like, yeah, you won, but it was a BO3, and G2 pushed you to the absolute limit here. And I just feel like this is not the team that I was kind of like watching in the LPL. They do feel like they've regressed a lot. I don't feel like they're looking nearly as consistent. I haven't really liked a lot of their drafts as much. You know, when I think the game today, it was like this game three stylist pick from Knight felt like there was barely any good ultimates to even steal at all against G2, and it felt like they were so hyper focused on denying this pick away that they kind of got like a little bit dizzy in draft. Game two, I felt like they got gapped really hard in draft with this kind of creative drafting that G2 had as well. And then they were like so focused on, oh God, we can't give caps to Salas again. It's like, well, Salas was good because you had Nico and Nar and like, you know, Renata and all this stuff. So I'm a little bit concerned about their drafting. I'm a little bit concerned about their play. Like obviously they have insanely talented players, and game one was like super dominant with like Knight playing as LeBlanc and, you know, and Bin on Jax and stuff. But game two and three were pretty shaky, and HLE is definitely not an easy opponent.
Yeah, I think from what we've seen so far, I would for sure favor HLE in this one. It does seem like I don't really know what's going on with BLG, whether it's just, you know, meta things or what, but I think pretty much everyone had high expectations for them. And like you said, they were one game from being eliminated to G2. Even in that final game, it looked like there were times where they were going to lose. I thought G2 kind of had it until Elk went sicko mode and just decided to play the best game of Ezreal I've ever seen. Just constantly getting out with 1 HP and putting out so much damage. Like that was pretty crazy to see, but I don't really know. It's hard to say why they've looked so shaky, but I think HLE just looking more solid.
I would say it was an underperformance from a bunch of the players on the team. To me, actually, even though they 2-0'd PSG, that series was even more worrisome.
Game one, they were down, what, like 6K, 7K?
Yeah, that one was more worrisome to me than their series versus G2, because their series versus PSG actually felt like it was been 1v9, and they also, like, they subbed back in Shun. I'm never really a big fan of splitting scrim time because it just feels like you're going to get a lot less overall team improvement, even though they've had pretty good comms about it. Both Wei and Shun have had pretty good comms, you know, about the situation and splitting scrims and stuff. But you know, I didn't really see like a positive thing. I didn't really see that in a positive light that they switched back. And then at various points, you know, some underperformances, you know, from Knight in a couple of situations, some from On. And so it just feels like there's a lot that is not, you know, feels like it's as like tight and practiced with the changes that have gone on to the game and to the meta and, you know, to the teams that they're playing now here at Worlds. So I have been pretty thoroughly like unconvinced. I was definitely with you where I had BLG rated extremely high coming into this tournament, also as a tournament favorite, along with Gen.G and HLE. And yeah, it's nothing short of an underperformance. I mean, people are already bringing back up, like, we used to have the days of all these like LPL, you know, number one seed curse, and there were so many, you know, tournaments in a row where we had like there would be one LPL team that would severely underperform, and so I think a lot of people just kind of have that inbuilt, you know, back in the back of their minds, kind of ready for it, and yeah, they certainly have been underperforming.
Yep. Speaking of LPL, our last matchup, LNG versus Weibo. What do you guys think about that one?
Should we talk about Hanwha a little bit first? I feel like we kind of didn't touch on Hanwha at all.
Oh, yeah. If you had more thoughts, for sure.
Yeah. I just, I mean, on the Hanwha side, I think I just definitely wanted to give a lot of credit to like Peanut and Delight. I feel like they have been playing insanely well, and especially Peanut's early games. I feel like he's had the best early games of any jungler at the tournament. I feel like his pathing has been really, really good. And always seems to be able to like make things happen. Even when he was playing Zyra and stuff, I felt like he had a lot of early pressure, and so I've been super impressed by him and like how consistent he's been. Like maybe he's not going to be as good of a team fighter as some of the other kind of like elite level junglers, later in the game, but he has just been playing so intelligent, and I feel like Delight has just found such insane engages. So he's been kind of really, really impressing me. I guess my kind of concern for HLE is what are they going to settle on as far as like mid lane picks and stuff for Zeka? Because Zeka obviously, like when he won Worlds last time, he was kind of known as like the melee only guy and whatever, and that kind of worked really, really well for them in a meta where I felt there was like a number of different melee picks that were super strong. In this meta, it feels like Yone is so far above the other melee mid laners that it's going to be tough because it's like 3 of their wins are with him on Yone. I don't think Zeka should get Yone a single game for the rest of the tournament. Like, I just don't think there's any way he should be allowed to play it. And the Smolder, like the mid Smolder, I'm like a little bit unconvinced by, I guess. And then like Yasuo mid and Akali mid and stuff, that also a little bit less convinced by. Silas feels situational based on the enemy draft more. So that's kind of like my kind of question mark or concern, I guess, for HLE. Even though I do kind of favor them, I think, coming into the series just based on how they've been playing. I'm a little bit concerned for their like meta read because Zeka did become a much more well balanced player in summer, but that was obviously like a lot around 80 carry mids, and that's kind of just dead now.
I don't think the spot that they picked Yasuo in versus FlyQuest was a very good like spot to pick it in. But I do think that it like can be a capable another like melee option. Exactly.
And that's how I feel about Silas too. So that's what I mean. It's like if Yone's always banned and Silas is situational and Yasuo's situational, and I don't know how you feel about Akali, but I feel like Akali's just not that good as a blind right now at all. So I'm like, well, if you can't play those, do you want him to just play like Smolder and stuff? He hasn't gone towards any of the mages.
I'm not sure about Akali because to me, I actually think she looks quite strong, but we haven't really seen the best teams play her yet. I think that generally when we've seen Akali, it's been from, play-in teams picking it mostly. So I would not be surprised if Zeka picked it up because her damage in a lot of the fights, and when she gets like Storm Surge and even like Rocket Belt, or I don't know, I think she has got a lot of build options, but she seems to do a ton of damage. And so depending on draft, like I don't know if you want to pick her against Kaisa because you get revealed, but I think it definitely could be a viable pick, especially against some mages because a lot of the time the laning phase is really rough, but in that mid-late game when you're just in the side lane, it's super scary to pick Orianna into Akali or something because if you ever just step up into her range and she can like come out of a bush and get on you, you're kind of just dead. So I think there's still hope for that champion. I think Zeka could pull it out.
Yeah, and he's played like some Orianna. His Ahri is probably like the mage that he'll probably go to the most because that's probably his like other mage. Like he has played some of the Orianna in spring. He had 3 games of it, and so the options are there, but we'll see how it actually develops for them. I think I have a decent amount of confidence, at least more than I have built up for BLG at this tournament, and so I feel like that's kind of swinging me right now. That's why I feel like there's just so much more even that we've just seen at this tournament to go off of, and I think they've definitely got the edge in this matchup.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yep. I do think they're favored, but I'm just like I just have to remember that HLE is 2-3 without Yone at Worlds, so it's like. It's like Yone's pretty good, and he makes Yone look insanely overpowered, and I don't think he's going to get it ever again. But we can jump into the last matchup if you want now, Medios.
Oh, yeah, sure. We've just got our LPL match of LNG versus Weibo, and I don't know. What do you guys think about that one?
I was really hyped for how quickly LNG went through and how good Scout looked. and how good they looked as a team. I mean, the story of Gala and a bunch of scouts, like ex teammates, like basically crowdfunding, getting him out of the court system to be able to get here to Worlds, and then he shows up and just absolutely smurfs in their games, and they're like instantly through. And then like we actually haven't seen LNG in what seems like a while, because they went straight through. I feel like I still have a lot of hype for them, because like I said, Scout was smurfing, Gala is popping off. I mean, we got to see Gala on back-to-back Kaisa games, and Kaisa is one of his most iconic champions, so like that goes without saying. But then Zika as well, like just turbo gapped. What was it, Kingen, in multiple games, and then his Camille game, he was like 6,000 gold ahead by the end of it, ahead of Kingen. And his Renekton game, he also was just like completely nullified the Olaf counter pick, and had such good like timing with his jungle to be able to flash in, punish the Olaf that had Ghost, and then got even a solo kill later on onto the Olaf that and it's just like, man, they were just completely demolishing. Then if we kind of look back and take stock, then you're kind of evaluating like, okay, well, that was D plus like at the very beginning, top end, and then we saw the complete downfall of DK. And so then it, like, I don't know how many like points you want to take away after that, after you saw like basically all of the LPL got to beat them up and take turns.
Yeah, that is so rough for DK. They start 2-0 and then just lose 6 out of their next 7 games. Pretty much just every LPL team having a turn at them. Definitely rough, but I think for this matchup, yeah, I mean, LNG, we haven't seen them lose yet. They just really speed ran it. I think that's probably as fast as, yeah, that's literally as fast as you can qualify through the Swiss stage. Just 4-0, done. Meanwhile, Weibo like barely snuck in, and I don't really know what's going on with their team, but I remember there was this one content piece they showed, like an interview with Zhao, or not, I was gonna say Zhao, not him. Xiaohu, yeah, sorry. Where what he said was, like, we have issues on the team, so I'm just gonna pick something proactive and try to carry. And then the very next game, they played Lucian mid with Nidalee jungle. And to me, that's just like, everybody is the protagonist on this team. This is some solo queue run right there, where it doesn't feel like you have a lot of faith in your teammates. That's usually not how you hear the best players talk about their team. They're just like, yeah, we're trash right now. I'm just going to have to carry these noobs. So, I don't know. Maybe they rally off of like qualifying. Maybe the stress is off a little bit, but I think Weibo's looking shaky and LNG's not. So,
yeah,
I'd probably go with LNG.
There's that was the game 1 against Fnatic, and they were giga ahead in that one, and Chris absolutely just sprinted it and threw the whole game. I feel like, where like they just ran past the tier 1 tower and tried to engage on Humanoid basically at the tier 2 tower with people around him and his team super far away, and all of Weibo ran in and just kind of like Congo line died, and monster through the game, and then kind of got outskilled because they were playing this like super early comp. Definitely it's not just Chris that is like, the reason that they're kind of shaky. I feel like this team has really struggled with the meta. They are really trying to make 80 carries mid work, and kind of just play the same style that they played in the LPL, which was like very heavily about Xiaohu just playing through side lanes and trusting in him being these 80 carries. Every game that they played of it, they lost. They played 3 80 carry games, Lucian mid, they played the Tristana mid, they lost every one of them. And then after losing that game 1 in Fnatic, where they're like, okay, this is like, we're going full early game, we're doing like Nidalee, Renekton, Lucian, whatever, they just full abandoned ship on that and just played scaling, and I think looked a lot more solid with it. But that being said, they definitely seem like they have a lot of holes. Even in the second game against Fnatic, I felt like Crisp was trolling. I feel like Crisp has been trolling a lot. Like he is really not playing very well. And it's kind of weird to say about someone who's like, world champion, but he has not been having a lot of good games. I remember game 2 against Fnatic. There's like this 2v2 that they have bought. Or it was 2v2 or maybe it was even 2v3, but he didn't use his ignite and the guy lives with like no health, like, like 50 health or 20 health or whatever it is, when Light would have been able to easily finish him if he just had ignited them before he died. And that would have actually been like a good trade for them. And then he comes back and they get a gank. Like they have Tarzan coming bottom and they get what is a guaranteed kill. Like the enemy person has no flash. He's 100% guaranteed. And he just, like right in Light's face, just ignites him when he's like no HP and steals the kill from the Ezreal. And it took like the Ezreal from being like guaranteed 2-0 start to just only has 1 assist and no kill. And I'm just like, you're actively griefing your team right now. But on the other end, I will say I feel like Breathe has been playing very well at Worlds. And his Jax in particular, I think, has been really, really strong. And I feel like Weibo are going to just fully abandon ship on the AD carries mid. And we'll kind of just have to see like how well they can play, what is the more standard meta, and what their prep, does arrive at. Because they have some more time, like especially if they play late, if they're one of the last quarters, they're going to have a while to kind of figure things out.
I would also kind of favor Scout over Xiaohu right now. So I think there's a couple of directions kind of pointing towards LNG for me. Plus, I also favor having more time just like shrouded in mystery and not having to show stuff on stage. And everybody does want to scrim against you as well for LNG. So like they'll have a little bit of extra.
It's definitely interesting too, because obviously they have a lot of history. They play in the LPL. Weibo did beat them in the regular season in the BO3 when they played. They beat them in playoffs when they played. It was a 5-game series that was really close. But then the thing that people are going to remember the most is when they played them in regionals, they 3-0'd them and they kind of like absolutely stomped them. And Weibo had
after finals.
a disaster finals weekend where they actually started by losing 7 straight games in finals into regionals. They got 3-0'd in the finals, then played LNG, got 3-0'd in the first round of the regional qualifier, and then lost the first game to JDG as well. So like on the same stage, they lost 7 straight games, and it was just like, oh no, are they really gonna like 0-9 miss Worlds? Like after being able to make finals and stuff. So, Weibo obviously can compete against them. They did beat them in a long competitive series. They did beat them in BO3 in the regular season. But I do think LNG, given Worlds form, is looking a lot better. And the most recent BO5 was very one-sided. So I definitely feel like LNG is going to get the better of them. But I do think Weibo have a chance to adapt, and I don't think that it's going to be like a super one-sided series or anything. I'm more expecting the playoff series than I am the regional gauntlet series.
Yeah, and if you look at both of the teams' series versus DK, I feel like the LNG one was, a bit more convincing, a bit more emphatic.
Absolutely. Well, it is about 2 a.m., so we have to fly out in the morning. I still have to pack, by the way. I'm sure you still have to pack too, so got to do all my packing and stuff, and then go to sleep, and then we're going to go straight to the airport for Paris. Then we have storm meetings the day after that. Got some rehearsals, and then we're right back at it for quarterfinals, and we will be coming to you with another episode of The Dive after the quarterfinals week. We'll try to get some guests on, either Dracos or Chronicler, or we'll get someone in on here to be able to chat about the games with us. Hopefully you have been enjoying Worlds so far, and hopefully FlyQuest can put up a good fight, or maybe even take down Gen.G and defy the odds. But we will see you next week after quarterfinals. And this is gonna wrap it up for us here on The Dive, driven by Kia. Remember, if you're watching us, on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of The Dive. You can also check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else. Make sure you send us your questions on Twitter with the hashtag TheDiveLOL. And Worlds continues this Thursday, October 17th, where LNG is going to take on Weibo. So I guess it is decided what the order is. So make sure to tune in. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.